The night had a peculiar way of swallowing the city whole, folding its streets and alleys into shadows that seemed thicker than usual. A silver fog rolled in from the river, curling around lampposts and bouncing off the wet asphalt, giving everything a muted, spectral glow. Somewhere in the heart of this sleeping city, a plan had been brewing for months, nurtured by every slight, every betrayal, every whispered insult that had been stored and catalogued in the mind of one patient man. He had learned long ago that revenge was not a spark to be lit in haste. It was a fire to be fanned carefully, silently, until the moment of ignition arrived. His name was Daniel Harrow, though few knew it and fewer still cared. In the world he moved through, anonymity was both a shield and a weapon. The target of his carefully orchestrated plan was a man named Victor Crane, a businessman whose empire was built on the kind of cunning that left no room for scruples. Victor had betrayed Daniel once, a slight so subtle it was almost invisible to anyone else, yet devastating enough to dismantle years of trust, loyalty, and quiet ambition. Daniel had been left with nothing but a smoldering sense of injustice and a resolve that hardened with each passing day. Tonight, everything converged. The warehouse on the outskirts of the industrial district loomed ahead, a hulking monolith of steel and shadow. Its windows were dark, its doors locked, its security systems state-of-the-art. But Daniel had anticipated every detail, every possible contingency. He moved like a whisper, a shadow among shadows, each step measured, deliberate. The world outside seemed distant, almost irrelevant, as if the city itself had paused to witness what was about to unfold. Inside the warehouse, Victor's collection of wealth, documents, rare artifacts, and untraceable bonds was stored under layers of electronic surveillance. Security cameras blinked in slow, mechanical rhythm, motion sensors waited like predatory animals, and a small army of alarms was programmed to scream at the slightest irregularity. None of it mattered. Daniel had studied the patterns for months, memorized the guard rotations, mapped the blind spots in the camera network, and even learned the codes that would render the alarms useless. Every move was rehearsed, every risk calculated. He slipped past the first set of sensors, his heartbeat steady, his breathing controlled. The warehouse smelled of old timber, machine oil, and the faint, metallic tang of coins and paper. He paused, crouching beneath a camera, letting the moments stretch. Time had a peculiar elasticity in situations like this. The seconds felt like minutes, and the minutes felt like hours. Then, with the precision of a seasoned conductor, he advanced. Reaching the vault, Daniel produced a small toolkit, each piece meticulously chosen for this singular moment. Locks clicked, bolts shifted, and the steel door groaned in quiet protest. He worked with the patience of a man who had counted every possible misstep, who had rehearsed failure in his mind until it became indistinguishable from the inevitability of success. When the vault finally yielded, the treasures inside gleamed in the faint light, a silent testament to years of greed and hubris. He didn't pause to admire them. Daniel's goal was not wealth. It was justice in its purest form, a reclamation of power through the perfect crime. Carefully, he gathered what he needed: evidence, documents, and a few items with personal significance to Victor, tokens that would serve as proof of the meticulous orchestration behind the theft. Each item placed into his bag was a word in a sentence of revenge, a punctuation in the story that Victor would never suspect was being written against him. As he retraced his steps, leaving no trace but the faintest whisper of movement, Daniel felt a peculiar satisfaction. This was not a heist born of desperation or greed. It was a symphony composed with the patience of a lifetime, each note carefully placed to elicit the precise reaction. Victor Crane would wake to find his world disrupted, his arrogance shattered, but he would never see Daniel's hand. The revenge would be complete before he even realized what had happened. By the time the city began to stir with the first light of dawn, Daniel was gone, absorbed once more into the anonymity he cherished. The warehouse sat empty, a fortress rendered impotent by the quiet precision of one man's vengeance. And somewhere in the echoing corridors of his mind, Daniel allowed himself the smallest smile, knowing that in a world built on deceit, he had orchestrated the perfect counterstrike. The city remained unaware, the streets still asleep, and yet, somewhere in its shadowed corners, the story of the Midnight Heist had been written, not in newspapers, not in headlines, but in the untraceable, indelible ink of revenge executed with flawless artistry. The world moved on, as it always does, but for Daniel, the night had spoken, and he had listened. The case of the Midnight Heist was closed, not by law, not by chance, but by the cold, meticulous hand of someone who had waited patiently for the perfect moment to strike. The story would not be told, but it would be remembered, in the small, shattered pieces of a man who had believed himself untouchable. And that, Daniel knew, was the sweetest victory of all. The city's heartbeat continued, oblivious to the quiet storm that had passed through it. Victor Crane awoke to the faintest sense of unease, the kind that creeps over a person when something is just off. At first, he dismissed it. Perhaps it was the restless sleep, the stress of a new deal, the lingering effects of a whiskey too strong. But as he walked through his office, the subtle signs of intrusion began to reveal themselves. A folder slightly out of place, the faint scuff of a shoe on the polished marble, the soft click of a lock undone where it should have remained sealed. Panic had no immediate place in Victor's mind. He was a man used to controlling chaos. Yet, as the evidence mounted, the panic grew like a silent shadow at the edge of his consciousness. He rushed to the warehouse only to find the steel doors unlocked, the alarms silent, the cameras recording nothing but a blank slate. For someone who prided himself on control, the realization that he had been outmaneuvered hit with the weight of a falling building. Meanwhile, Daniel watched from a distance, hidden among the early morning fog. He observed Victor's frantic movements, the frantic calls to security, the muted shouts at employees who could provide no answers. Daniel felt no joy in destruction itself. His satisfaction came from the precision, from the silent acknowledgement that years of betrayal had been accounted for with perfect balance. Each move Victor made only confirmed the thoroughness of Daniel's planning. In the following days, Victor's life became a chaotic scramble. Documents critical to his empire had vanished, irreplaceable evidence of his dealings now beyond reach. The media would never know the true story. No cameras, no witnesses, no fingerprints. It was a heist executed in shadows, a lesson delivered without fanfare. Friends and rivals alike whispered rumors of Victor's downfall, never knowing that the architect of his misfortune was watching in silence, content to let the story unfold naturally. Daniel, however, was not done. Revenge, he knew, was not always about immediate payoff. It was about establishing a quiet, undeniable truth. Over the next week, he leaked select evidence anonymously, carefully chosen to dismantle Victor's reputation without implicating himself. Contracts fell apart, investors questioned loyalty, and the empire Victor had built with arrogance began to crack. The pieces had been set in motion months ago, and now they moved with a momentum all their own. Through it all, Daniel remained unseen. No trace linked him to the Midnight Heist, no witness could identify his face, no camera could capture his movement. He had become an enigma, a ghost with a purpose. And as he watched Victor struggle to regain control, a sense of quiet finality settled over him. This was justice, not by law, not by chance, but by intellect and patience, executed with the precision of an artisan. The city itself, indifferent to both the heist and its consequences, continued to move forward. The streets filled with the ordinary, cars, pedestrians, vendors, unaware of the invisible chess game that had played out in their midst. And Daniel, having closed this chapter of his life, disappeared once more into the folds of anonymity. His revenge was complete, but more than that, it was perfect. Every detail had been anticipated, every move predicted, every risk mitigated. In the art of retribution, he had painted a masterpiece, unseen yet indelible. The case of the Midnight Heist would never appear in police reports, never dominate headlines, never be chronicled in history books. Yet it would live on in the quiet fractures left behind in the life of a man who believed himself untouchable. And somewhere, in the cool, fog-drenched streets of the city, Daniel allowed himself the faintest smile, knowing that he had delivered the ultimate lesson, that patience, intellect, and meticulous planning could render vengeance not only possible but flawless.